So Ducati has just announced the 2025 Multistrada, and that leaves us with one question. Has anything changed? So behind me is our 2022 Multistrada V4S. Now, I've had this thing since new. I have almost 25,000 miles on it so far, and it has been frankly amazing. I absolutely love this platform. Previously, I had a 2015 Multistrada, right when that generation came out, and I love that as well. It's truly a go-anywhere bike and have fun doing it, and Ducati is absolutely killing it. Now, they've just made the announcement that the 2025 Multistrada has gone through a little bit of a refresh period, not a full redesign, but a refresh, and there are several notable changes from the outgoing original V4 Multistradas to the new mid-cycle refresh 2025 and up V4 Multistradas. So let's talk about them. Of course, with every model refresh, there is always the bold new graphics, and that is no different with the new Multistrada. They have replaced the plastics on the front, made the nose a little bit different. There's a little bit of color that gets brought down further onto the nose itself. And the plastics themselves, as we go deeper in the bike, where we kind of have this tan and light silver on the outgoing Multistrada, the new one is like darker gray almost. And that's keeping with their overall branding. The new Pikes Peak has a full redesigned front, and the graphics is more reminiscent of their racing bikes. The wheels have been redesigned for the actual Multistrada. Now, the Pikes Peak used to have the Marchesini forged wheels, and Ducati's brought forged wheels to the base V4 and V4S, now with a new design, still a 19-inch front, 17-inch rear, but they're saying they're saving 2 kilograms of weight between the front and the rear, which should add to increased handling, the ability to change direction, so it should be actually noticeable. That's a significant amount of weight saved from these wheels. When we talk about ride modes and capability, the Multistrada has always had multiple bikes in one being the idea. Now, this particular Multistrada, as with previous generations, has the modes Sport, Touring, Urban, and Enduro, meaning it can do a little bit of off-road, it is good around town, it has settings for highway comfort as well as sporty riding. Ducati is always updating these bikes. Every 6 months or so, there's an update, a tweak to the algorithm where they're constantly improving, which I absolutely love. The products keep getting better even after you own them. They have brought a new mode to the new generation of Multistrada, which I imagine will probably be something we see in the older generations as well, but it's a wet mode. So I have already set my urban mode up as kind of a wet mode, dropping it down and increasing some of the safety measures so I can use that as a wet mode. They now have a wet mode built into the bike, so you can customize that, and it is tuned specifically for low grip on pavement riding, which I think is pretty cool. They have also added in an engine brake control. If you know, they already have it on, I believe, the Enduro model as well as their Panigale line. They have the electronically adjustable engine brake control. That was a big complaint I've heard from a bunch of people about this Multistrada, is that you couldn't adjust it. It does change between the ride modes, between sport, touring, enduro, and so forth. It does change the engine braking that's pre-programmed in the algorithm, but as the user, you cannot change it yourself. Well, in 2025, they've added the Ducati engine brake controller to your options, so now as a rider, you can customize the exact experience you want in each mode. They have separated the suspension button from being attached to the modes. Now, in the previous generation, in the 2020 through the 2024 Multistradas, you can adjust the suspension hardness, but you can't adjust the setting. In each mode, it is pre-programmed in off-road, in sport, in touring, how it behaves specifically. And in the new model, in the new 2025, you can now select an off-road based suspension algorithm as well as the varied hardness that you can do on the outgoing Multistrada, but you can put that in a different ride mode. So if you like one particular behavior, since they're all a little bit different, you can actually change that now in each ride mode, which gives you just that much more customizability for your bike. There's also a new forward collision algorithm that lets you know by a notice on the dash that you can set intervals with forward collision alerts, basically letting you know with the front radar that you're getting close to something pretty quickly. Much like the automotive realm, you can change the distance that you want that to activate at, but that will give you a pop-up alert on your dash here, so if you're running maps or something else that's distracting you from the road ahead, it will hopefully get your eyes back on the road. Cylinder deactivation has made it to all the bikes. Previously, the off-road only variant was the one that received the extended rear cylinder deactivation. From standard, these Multistrada V4s have rear cylinder deactivation only when stopped. So when you're sitting at a red light or in traffic, you end up not getting a lot of heat to the rider because it shuts off this rear bank cylinder operating as a parallel twin just in the front. With the Enduro model, they carried that through and made that up to about 3,800 RPM, I believe was the setting. And under a certain throttle position, it would keep the rear bank cylinders off or shut them off while riding to make it a little bit more efficient. That way you just ran on that front V-twin, you didn't have that heat to the rider, and most importantly, you're saving fuel. It says it saves an average of about 6% of fuel. Now every Multistrada is getting that feature. I've been waiting for an answer from Ducati whether this is going to come to all the V4s eventually. I don't know if there's something different in the engine that allows this to work. Maybe a load sensor. I have no idea if their engine is different at all. But the new 2025 Multistrada is going to come in all variants with that extended rear cylinder deactivation. With suspension, there's been quite a few changes made. First off, the rear swing arm, the position of the pivot was actually changed, and they said they moved it 1 millimeter. I don't know how much different 1 millimeter is going to make. That tells me they got it pretty right the first time. They said they moved it forward 1 millimeter, and that was to decrease the squatting that you get on acceleration. Still trying to balance that for comfort, and they say that change made the improvement that they wanted without sacrificing any of the rider comfort. The suspension is new with a new fork position sensor in the front end of the bike. This is supposed to give some real-time feedback to the computer and allow some new software trickery to happen in this bike. There's a bump detection feature that now will detect when the front end hits a bump, tell the computer that so it can automatically change settings in the rear shock to accommodate that bump, which should make the ride just a little bit more compliant in sporty riding and more comfortable in touring mode. The rear shock is all new as well. The new one now features an extra reservoir to allow the active ride height system. The outgoing generation with one of the first software updates saw a minimum ride height mode where on demand the rider could press a button on the handlebar and the suspension would drop down. Later revisions of the software, later updates, started with the easy pickup setting, so whenever you turn this bike on, it will drop itself down to make it easy to get off the kickstand and to load up, and then it'll pick back up once you start moving. They've carried that through now on the new Multistrada to have, like BMW and Harley have had, under a certain speed, it will drop the bike down to a preset setting, and then when you reach a certain speed again, it will drop itself back up. Personally, I don't like my front geometry changing when I ride. I want it to do what I want it to do, but it does make it a little bit more appealing, I guess, for some shorter riders. And it's nice to see Ducati at least keeping up in technology with other manufacturers. Now, Ducati has installed what is known as their Ducati Vehicle Observer System on the new Multistrada, and from the best I can tell, that is a new algorithm of taking into account all the sensors on this bike, from the IMU that controls the pitch and roll and measures that, to what all the wheels are doing, what the suspension is doing, some new sensors all through the bike, to give the bike a better feel for dynamically how it's acting, what it's doing, where the physics are going, where the mass is going, to better handle the bike, to better proportion the brakes, to better proportion the suspension, to make it overall a more stable and more comfortable ride, whether you're riding by yourself or two up. Now, this may be the biggest takeaway from this unveiling, and that is regarding the new rear brake. Ducati's heard your complaints. Now, this rear brake is a lot better than the past generations. It actually works, and I do like it. But the new rear brake goes from a 265mm rotor to a 280mm rotor. So we're bumping up in size, should give us more overall feedback and more bite over that rear brake. And I think that's a good thing, and I think that's going to give us all what we've been asking for, just a lot better rear pedal feel and rear brake feel. They've also tweaked the ABS system. We've had front to rear braking, meaning when you squeeze the front lever, depending on the mode, it may apply rear brake as well. Now we have rear to front braking, so depending again on ride mode, what the algorithm allows, hitting that rear brake pedal will now send brakes to the front end. So again, it'll increase that rear pedal feel. As you start stepping on that rear brake, you're going to get brakes from both wheels, which will feel a whole lot more solid. Ducati has made a couple changes to the headlights. It says the beam pattern is largely the same, but they've tweaked it a little bit, so it provides a little bit more light right in front of the front wheel. They say that was a kind of a shadow point before, so they fixed that. Hopefully that means you don't need those fog lights that are down there anymore. But I'll tell you, these Amazon driving lights I got were well worth the money. Now there are some changes to the back of the bike as well. Something as minor as the rear top case now has an aluminum base instead of a plastic one that can be rigid mounted or flexible, like this floating system that the Multistrada's had. They've also included the rear subframe from the Enduro and from the Grand Tour, basically elongating the subframe, moving the bags, top case and side bags back about 12 millimeters. That's supposed to let the passenger get on and off a little bit easier, provide a little bit more room, which seems like a nice update. On the back end, they've changed the algorithm a little bit for the smart brake lights. Depending on your speed and braking effort, it will flash now the brake light and possibly the turn signals down there. They've also now added a fog light option, so you can get a different license plate bracket that has a light built into the top of it that when your fog lights are activated will illuminate. That way you can see through just like the European fog lights now. Now, I'll leave a link to the actual Ducati video up above. That way you guys can check out the full press release of this thing in Italian, obviously with subtitles. My question to you is, did Ducati do enough? Now, this seemed mildly reminiscent of the upgrade in the last generation when we went from the 1200 DVT to the 1260 with some geometry changes and some overall quality of life changes. So far in the V4 generation, we have the V4, the V4S, the V4 Enduro came out, the V4 Pikes Peak, and the V4 Gran Turismo, and the V4 RS. There are 6 variants of this bike right now before the new one was released. Are there big things in store for the new 2025, or is this just a placeholder for the new generation? Either way, I'm glad to see Ducati innovating. I'm glad to see what they've done. It seems like every change that they've made was warranted, that they've been listening to their customers. And again, Ducati, every 6 months or so, aims to put out software updates to make your bike better. So if you've not had yours to the dealership to have it updated, it's worth the quarter hour or half hour labor rate to get this thing plugged up to the computer and let it update. You're going to get some pretty cool features. So is there anything else you want to see? Any other changes you would like to see for the next generation Multistrada? Let me know in the comments below. Hopefully I can get in touch with Ducati and hear what they have in store, if any of these features are going to be backwards compatible with the first of the V4 Multistradas prior to 2025. Hoping the cylinder deactivation does. The rest of the stuff, it seems like it requires additional sensors, so I'm not too sure that it will. As always, if you haven't already, hit that like button and subscribe if you like this sort of content. Please do. It helps us out a lot here. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.